Hi and welcome to this week's episode of Shit That Didn't Happen, the History Edition. My name is Lisa, your friendly host, and today I want to put the cat amongst the pigeons when I ask you this simple question: how many wives did Henry VIII have? If you're there shouting at the screen, 6, Lisa, well, you're correct, kinda. I don't know. Let's dig a little deeper. So yes, there is a musical called 6 named after the wives of Henry VIII. And yes, Henry had 6 marriages. Or did he? This is where it gets a little bit more complicated. We've all heard the rhyme, divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. Well, I've got a new rhyme for you. Annulled, annulled, died, annulled, annulled, survived. I know, it's not as fun, it's not as catchy, but why annulment versus divorce? Well, this was quite an important factor in the reasoning behind Henry VIII getting all of his annulments or divorces, whatever you want to call them. Henry wanted his marriages to have never existed. So when it comes to the marriage of Catherine of Aragon, he had that marriage of over 20 years annulled because he said, under God, under the rules of Leviticus, he should have never married his brother's widow. And it was that reason why God was angry with him and would not give him a son. Not because Henry VIII almost certainly had syphilis or some other issue that meant that he, the man, was responsible for why he could not, in fact, have sons. And indeed, if you look at the sons he did have that survived infancy, both Edward and Henry Fitzroy died very young. His daughters, well, Mary I became queen. She was only queen for 5 years, and yes, we know her as Bloody Mary because she really liked to kill a load of Protestants. But Elizabeth I, well, she lived until old age. She gave us the glorious golden age. And what of his other daughters? Because, well, he had several, let's be frank. What of Mary Boleyn's daughter, Catherine Carey? And all I'm saying is, if you go and look at pictures of Catherine Carey, well, she looks suspiciously like Elizabeth. And more importantly, her daughter Lettice, yes, she was actually called Lettice, also looks suspiciously like Elizabeth. And for those of you who know your history, you'll know that Robert Dudley, when he realised the Queen was never going to marry him, ran off and married Lettice. I mean, poor Lettice, because you know he was not thinking of her when he was doing the deed. So, annulments. Yes. He annulled his marriage to Catherine of Aragon. So therefore, under law, it never happened. It never occurred. So yes, they got married. And yes, she was his wife. But on the other hand, was she his wife? Legally, no. And then we're going to look at both Anne Boleyn and Catherine Howard together. And that's because, well, he wasn't going to have his wives executed. He sought out annulments in both of those cases. So before the executions were carried out, they were no longer legally the Queens of England. I mean, it does feel like small print that we'd all kind of overlook. But yeah, technically, he annulled both of those marriages. And what of Anne of Cleves? Well, we've all heard the story that she was too ugly. Again, this is Henry VIII blaming the woman for everything. What we actually believe happened was that Anne of Cleves wasn't expecting the king to turn up. And she didn't recognise him. And Henry VIII, being the egomaniac he was like, well, I can't have a wife who doesn't recognise me, who doesn't fall on her knees and worship me. I mean, quite frankly, at this point, he was overweight. He had nasty, stinky legs and was known for being quite grumpy. The young athletic king that had been was no longer. Henry VIII suffered an injury during a jousting tournament. And we also know that he suffered a very quick change of personality and behaviour. Now, what we now know from traumatic head injuries is that this can result in a drastic change in personality. This is probably what happened to Henry VIII, and unfortunately the Henry that woke up from that accident was mean. He was a tyrant. He was horrible to the wives that came after. He was horrible to Anne Boleyn, of whom we know that he had been deeply in love with. So maybe if we could go back, if we had a time machine, if we could stop him getting on that horse, could you imagine how different history would be? But again, back to the rhyme. So, he annuls his marriage to Anne of Cleves. And this was a mutual agreement. And by mutual, I mean Anne of Cleves almost certainly didn't want to be married to Henry VIII, but as a woman, she didn't have a choice. So when he comes to her and says, oh, I have made this, bad decision. I want you to be my sister. Well, she would have been stupid to say no. Anne of Cleves got to live her life pretty independently and with quite a lot of money, and didn't have to sleep with Henry VIII. Win-win all round. So, Catherine of Howard. I feel for her. She was very young. She'd been raised in the French court, and she made mistakes. Unlike her cousin, Anne Boleyn, whom, by the way, was framed, absolutely didn't commit adultery, but they wanted her gone. And because they had used biblical verses to get rid of Catherine of Aragon, they had to attack Anne in a different way. They didn't want to go down the same route of trying to find a reason for why the marriage wasn't legal, but they needed to find a route out. And well, the Bible says that the only way to have a divorce or an annulment is adultery. It was the only thing that was left for them. And it was an easy sell. You see, for all the Catholics who had believed that Henry was legally married to Catherine of Aragon, Anne Boleyn was already a whore. She was married to a man who was already married. So for them, it was easy to sell this idea that Anne was evil, that she had bewitched a king. Henry chased after her for more than 5 years. I mean, really, if this was a modern day case, we'd all be being like, hey, maybe we need to get like a restraining order against this man. But again, he was the king. He was powerful. And his wives were the victims. Now, that doesn't mean that they're completely innocent or that they didn't have any power or any say in any of this. I would not say this. Anne was quite wise. She was intelligent. His wife, Catherine Parr, often forgotten because she's the last wife who came. And while the second wife that realistically, legally existed, with his only 2 marriages that existed legally, would be to Jane Seymour and Catherine Parr. Well, she's often a footnote in her own story, which is kind of unfortunate because she was a badass. Catherine Parr was so intelligent, and she was an author. She had books printed in the Tudor age as a woman. Now, don't get me wrong, yes, some of that privilege came from the fact that she was the queen, but she was a pretty badass queen. So if you don't know much about Catherine Parr, there's so many books on her. There's so much more to her story than being the 6th and final wife of Henry VIII. And whilst we're talking about Henry, yeah, he did probably have syphilis or some sort of autoimmune disorder or God knows what, but he almost certainly was the issue in this whole messed up period of history. But thankfully for us, he did have 2 daughters who became queens. But when it comes to it, whether you believe that Henry had 6 wives or 2, none of it really matters. They're all long and gone. But whilst I have your attention, I just wanted to talk about something that I truly believe and live by, and that's that history is not something that belongs in a box. History is a living, breathing thing. We are all making history just by watching this video. And history is going to talk about this period. It is so easy to feel fatigued when so much stuff is going on. It's really easy to want to turn away. But when there is a rise of fascism, there is also a rise in anti-fascists. Or feeling pretty disillusioned, or you feel like you're just losing hope with the way that the world seems to be going right now, take some courage and some inspiration from the really amazing people that came before us. And if you want to know more about active resistance that is kind of rooted in the more recent history, go look up some of the amazing stories of the French and Polish resistance during the Second World War, because again, there's some pretty amazing badasses out there that we can all take a paragraph out their book as just a slight starting point. Take care, and if you're interested in history, please give me a like and subscribe. And if you have any ideas for any future videos, please do let me know in the comments. Take care now. Bye.